Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes designed to inspire your spirit. And you can learn more at my website, illuminatingsouls.com, where you can also sign up for my mailing list. There are two different places you can sign up for my list. The one at the top of the homepage will sign you up for the part of my list where you get all the announcements. So you'll hear from me a handful of times throughout the month. But if you want even more, further down on the page, you will see a place where you can sign up for my daily inspiration email blast. And with that list, you will get an inspiring email from me every weekday. So lots of ways we can connect. But for now, the angels and I are here to help you come into a place of sweet sanctuary that will help you replenish, restore, and connect with the waves of divine love that are here for you. It's early morning as I am recording this, and I'm kind of having a hard time getting started. I was just doing random searching on the internet. You know how that is. You look up one thing and it's 20 minutes later and you've gone down a rabbit hole. And I meant to start recording this earlier, and I'm just laughing at myself because I just did nothing for 20 minutes. And I'm kind of tired, but this is a sleep podcast, so my bringing my sleepy energy to this recording is actually great. I don't have to be high energy and bright and shiny. It's okay to be a bit sleepy right now. And maybe I can share this sleepiness with you, especially if you're getting ready for bed. Those of you who listen know that I listen to a sleep podcast every night as I go to sleep, and it helps build a bridge between my waking consciousness and that beautiful, odd, drifty kind of space that we go into before we finally go to sleep. In the last few episodes, I shared with you that I had been listening to Sleepy Bookshelf, and the host Elizabeth has been reading Heidi, which is a delightful book. I realize I've never read the book, which if you had asked me a few months ago if I'd ever read Heidi or seen the movie, I would have said yes, because it's so iconic. And after reading, well, I didn't really read, after listening to the book, I realized I had never read it. It just ended. It's 10 episodes long. So if you're looking for something sweet to add to your repertoire of sleep podcasts, including this one, The Sleepy Bookshelf and Heidi was really, really good. And now I'm waiting to see what book she's going to read next. We should know in the next week or so. I hope it's something I really want to listen to, because sometimes she reads books that I don't care about. And that's how it is with podcasting, right? It's like some episodes might be your favorite, others you might not love as much, and it's all good. There's so much content out there. You can always find something that touches your heart. And I am grateful that you have found your way to this broadcast. It touches my heart more than you will know that we get to share this time together. And I will ask, if you are enjoying the podcast, if you'll consider leaving a rating and a review on iTunes. That would be wonderful. Whenever I see a new review posted, my heart gets so happy, because at this point the podcast is small enough that the reviews that are left are good ones. I don't know how I would feel if I ever got a less than loving review, but right now our audience is small enough that I don't know that if anyone is not liking it, that they would take the time to leave a review. Please don't do that. I don't know why I even say that. Of course you wouldn't, but you know what I mean. There's this sense of vulnerability that comes, I think, anytime we share pieces of our lives, and we just leave it out there to be found by whoever is meant to join us in our endeavors. And so here we are. So I invite you to get comfortable. And if you are preparing for bed or taking a nap, to cozy on up and snuggle on in. And your angels are going to bring you a lot of love. There's always love here for you, I promise. And I invite you to take some nice deep breaths in and out. I know you are breathing already, but there is something about the intentional breath, bringing our awareness to the breath, that allows us to become more present, to receive, and open to the love of the angels. So the angels are already here, but I love sharing the ritual with you of calling them in. So I will do that now. And beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here. I ask that you bring forward a beautiful sanctuary of light, of love, of soothing, calming energy to help each of our beloveds come into a deep place of rest. And angels, I ask that you help to clear our energy fields of anything that is not ours, helping to uplift us into brighter energies, helping us attune to our brighter tomorrows. And dear ones, just take some nice deep breaths in, and with your permission, the angels are infusing the space you are in with a beautiful, soft, pink light that is filled with love that has been calibrated just for you. There are so many things that I love about working with the angels and receiving these infusions of light. And one is that it always shifts and changes to meet us where we are. So even though I'm recording this, and right now it's in August of 2023, and you might be listening to this weeks, months, or years later, the energy you receive in this moment will be calibrated for where you are right now. You know, some days we need comforting, some days we need inspiration, some days we don't even know what we need, but the good thing is that the angels know. It's one of the things I love about this angelic connection is it always meets me where I am. I think sometimes there's this perception in spirituality that we have to somehow raise our energy in order to receive. And that can feel like a catch-22, especially if you're not feeling that you have the inner resources to raise your own energy. Don't worry about it. The angels will meet you where you are. They'll meet you where you are right now. You don't have to worry about doing the heavy lifting. That's what they're here to help you with. So don't feel that if you're having a rough time, that the angels aren't with you or can't help you. You know, I tend to be a pretty hopeful, optimistic person, but even I have my times when that feels elusive. And in those moments, the angels hold that faith, that hope, that vision of brighter tomorrows for us. There's a lot transpiring in our lives and in the world right now. And I think many of us are experiencing life fatigue. You know, it's like we've been holding the light for a long time. We've been moving forward, doing our best, eating our energetic Wheaties. Do you guys remember that? Those commercials about eating our Wheaties, right? Energetic Wheaties. And we're waiting for the easy breezy times. And I don't know when those show up. I think we can have easy breezy moments for sure. And I have learned to really savor those moments when something lovely happens. My husband and I have been harvesting our tomato crop. And just so you know, I take zero credit for our tomato crop. It is all my husband. Wes goes out there every day, sometimes twice a day, to nurture his babies, as he calls them. We have raised bed planters in our yard, and we must have planted, again, the royal we, I did nothing. Wes must have planted 12 different tomato plants, different varieties. I did help purchase the plants, but that's where my participation ended. And they have grown really tall, and they've blended into each other. And we have lots of different kinds of tomatoes, and so we are in the overflow of tomatoes, which is so joyful. And that's what I mean about finding those moments of brightness. And so we've been picking our tomatoes, and we've been giving them to our neighbors, shopkeepers. I gave some to the FedEx delivery driver. It's such a joy to say, would you like some tomatoes from our garden? And people say yes, and we get to share our abundance and our overflow and our joy and our love with them. And it's bringing us both a lot of joy to be able to do that. So even when things feel heavy, let the angels help you find moments of sweetness, of lightness, of spirit, of connection. And I affirm that you get to receive these. You don't have to be the generator of them. So maybe somebody will offer you some beautiful homegrown tomatoes or something else that will be delightful for you. And just in case you are wondering, we still have tomatoes. They're still going strong. And I find it to be an amazing lesson in the design of abundance. Tomato seeds are tiny, tiny little things. But that one seed has the potential to grow into a tomato plant that produces hundreds of tomatoes. Now, I just think that's wondrous. Wondrous. I know it's commonplace. I know it happens all the time. But to actually participate in the cycle of growing these plants. It is a joy, and it feels like a miracle. I know miracles are often thought of as unexplainable phenomenon, but if you could see our backyard right now, you would say, I can see how that would feel like a miracle. So here's to the most ordinary of miracles that are around us all the time. It's simply about shifting our perception so that we can see them. We also have a blackberry bush that keeps producing blackberries. And I can just walk by and pick a few and eat them, and they're delicious. I don't have to go to the supermarket and buy them packed in plastic. They're right there in my yard, our yard. And again, because Wes has been tending to our blackberry bush. So here's to everyday, ordinary miracles and moments of delight and sweetness and joy. So take a nice deep breath in and breathe this into your heart. And I am sending you some virtual astral tomatoes for you to enjoy from our garden. And so you go ahead and drift off when you are ready. And while you rest, the angels will be with you. And I'm going to move us on into story time. And for story time, it's very apropos that we were just talking about the tomatoes in our garden, because I'm going to be talking to you about my love of fruit, which sounds really weird, I know. This was inspired because I just posted a replay of one of my favorite episodes that I did, which is the Ode to Apples, where I shared many apple stories with you. And this style of storytelling is really inspired by one of my favorite classes I've ever offered, The Power of Your Voice, where I help people come into their stories, because we all have stories. And in everyday life, we have opportunities to share our stories. We just don't call them stories. It's what happens when you meet someone for lunch and you say, "How are you?" And then they tell you. So we all have these snippets of stories that dwell within us. And I've sort of challenged myself in the most lovely, joyful way to see if I have 40 minutes worth of fruit stories to share with you. And I think I do. And if I don't, I'm going to go into some of my old recipe books and find some fruit recipes with you. But I really want to share with you my love of fruit. I love fruit, and I have since I was a kid. And so I'm going to give you some different fruit stories from my life by Laurel Bleadon-Maffei. So here we go. Let me begin by saying I have always loved fruit. In our house, we didn't have a lot of sugar things, right? My mom was always watching her weight, and then as I started to gain weight, she was always watching my weight. And so we weren't a cookie, candy kind of house. That was a treat. It's not that we were denied those things, but I've always had a sweet tooth. And fruit is nature's candy. So I've always loved fruit. My earliest memory of how fruit came into our home was my mom would shop at a little neighborhood supermarket called Linwood, the Linwood Market. I don't know if big chain supermarkets were a thing at that point. I was very young. I was at an age that I could sit in the cart, so I'm assuming I must have been 3 or 4, right? So So at that point, my cognitive abilities were probably somewhat limited. But I remember being pushed in the cart by my mom. I can kind of remember other areas of the market, but the thing that lives in my memory bank is the fruit section, the produce section. And the thing that I remember most was there was always a lovely display of grapes. I have had a love affair with grapes my entire life. What a miraculous fruit grapes are. In those years, it was green grapes. And my love of grapes is so great that to this day, you will almost always find grapes in my refrigerator. But I'll come back to that. So, one of my first memories of shopping for fruit was the Linwood grocery store. And for those of you who listen who have spent any time of your childhood in Skokie, you might remember that as well. It was at the corner of Toohey and Crawford. I think a bank is there now. The other thing I remember was the seasonality of fruit growing up. I don't know how much the seasonality comes into play in the Midwest anymore. I know we get things trucked and on cargo ships and things. I live now in California where our growing season is a little bit longer, so we have more access to fruit than I remember growing up with. It's like there was the summer fruit month where there were peaches and apricots and berries and melons. And then there was apple season and oranges, which wasn't much fun because by that point it's winter and the fruit isn't as good. But summer was glorious fruit season. In our home, there was always fruit. And so when my mom was putting out whatever she was serving for dinner, she would usually cut up some fruit in the summer months. So she might cut up some cantaloupe or honeydew or pineapple. And I don't know how many other people's parents or grandparents, whoever was in charge of dissecting the pineapple, cut it up this way, but my mom always cut it up into quarters. And then she would kind of slice along the rind and make little segments, and we would all sort of devour the pineapple that way. I will say I no longer can eat pineapple, which is very sad because I have loved it. But somewhere about 15 years ago, something changed for me and I can no longer eat acidic fruit. And the last time I had a piece of pineapple, I got very, very sick and missed my niece's bat mitzvah. So I no longer go near pineapple. But as a kid, I loved pineapple. And I loved just about every kind of summer fruit. And my mom had this little metal colander with a handle on it. And almost all the time during the summer, there was some kind of fruit in it. If she had bought raspberries, that's what would be in there until we ate them all. And we would walk past the kitchen or walk into the kitchen and you'd grab a few berries. And that kind of fruit usually didn't last long enough to make it into the refrigerator. We were sort of a graze and go kind of family. Now my sister did not like fruit. So the people doing the grazing for the most part were my father, my mother, and I, except when it came to grapes, and then was my brother too. And this is where a very mild form of grape trauma comes in for me. Nothing dark will be shared here, I promise you. So I loved grapes. Grapes were my favorite thing in the world to eat. And they never lasted long in our house because my father, my brother, and I all loved them. And there were many a time that I was walking home from school because I was what they called a walker. There were people who went on the bus, and then there were the walkers. I lived in the walking zone, so I walked 3 blocks to school and 3 blocks home. It was the 60s and the 70s. It was all okay. And on the way home, I would be thinking about the grapes. I'm going to eat grapes when I get home. I've always been a foodie. I've always been contemplating what I get to eat next my whole life. So I'd be like, grapes. I'm going to have grapes. Yay, grapes. And I would get home and they would be gone. Because my brother might have beat me to them. And they would be gone. And I would be so sad. Or there would be the stems of the grapes, and there'd be like 3 grapes left. You know, like especially as a kid, when you mess with each other, and someone says, don't eat all the grapes. And so you don't. You leave like 3 lonely grapes hanging off the stems, but you see the giant stem of where 60 grapes used to live. And so I would come home and there would be no grapes, or there would be 3 left. And so I learned to eat a lot of grapes when the grapes were available because they might not be available later. And so that is why I'm sure at the age of 61 to this day, you will always find grapes in my refrigerator. Wes doesn't eat them, so it's all on me. And especially since I've had bariatric surgery, I cannot eat a lot of grapes. So I have to remember not to buy the Costco size grape tub. So just because my early childhood lack experience when it comes to grapes, it does not translate to adult Laurel needing 5 pounds of grapes that I will eat on my own. So I've had to learn how to thread the needle of my grape desire. And I also now am profoundly selective about the grapes that I purchase. I used to eat any kind of grape. Any grape, put it in front of me, I'll eat it. I had a cast iron stomach. I could handle it. Now, the grapes have to have a very high sugar content. So I'll share with you some of my favorite varieties of grapes because as a kid, I thought there were just green grapes and red grapes, and then grape juice. But there are many, many, many varieties of grapes. And especially living near Napa, wine grapes, there's all kinds of grapes. So let me share with you, not that I expect you to be profoundly interested in this, but it's a sleep podcast, and I hope you're drifting off. Some of my favorite grape varieties, especially one that if you are listening to this and it is late August of 2023 or early September, you are in luck because there's an amazing grape variety that is available right now. They are called Kyoho grapes. Kyoho, Kyoho grapes. My understanding is they're a Japanese variety, and they taste like purple grape juice. They do have seeds, so if you are grape seed phobic, this might not be for you. They're huge. They're huge. They're like bigger than a quarter. They're big. And each one, it tastes like a flavor explosion in your mouth. They're delicious. And they're only available about 2 months out of the year. Now you might be thinking to yourself, but Laurel, I do not live in Northern California, in grape country. Where would I find Kyoho grapes? Well, my friend, I have a potential source for you. You may not have ever heard of this before, but there is a wonderful Asian supermarket called Weee, Weee, and their website is SayWee, SayWeee.com. And they deliver to many major metropolitan areas in the U.S. If you're outside of the U.S., I do not have a shopping tip for you. But if you're inside the U.S. and you're near one of the major metropolitan areas, they seem to have a very wide delivery radius. They must have local warehouses somewhere, because I just was able to discover for a friend who lives in Michigan that Kyoho grapes are available for her through SayWee. So I will put the link in the show notes for SayWee, especially if you're getting sleepy. And just so you know, it will be an affiliate link. Not that I'm trying to get you to buy stuff so I get stuff, but why not? If you are going to go to SayWee for Kyoho grapes, we'll both get $10 off our next order. And if you don't want to use that link, Google. It is our friend. So Kyoho grapes are amazing. They're really a delicacy. And there's a bunch of different varieties of Kyoho grapes. All of them are good. I have some in my refrigerator right now that I bought at the Asian supermarket. I didn't have to go through SayWee. I'm fortunate to live where there are some wonderful Asian supermarkets. Or I can go to Berkeley Bowl, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So back to childhood memories. Grapes were my thing. Melons cut up. Awesome. And apples, I did a whole apple episode, so I'm not going to spend much time on them other than to say I hate a mealy, mushy apple. An apple must be crisp and sweet. I cannot handle tart apples, but as a kid, loved a big apple. Had to be as big as my head, big as possible. We also had a sour cherry tree in our yard. I don't know at this point how I ever ate those things, but as a kid, we would wait all spring for the cherries to turn the perfect shade of pinkish red. They were tiny. I don't know if you've ever had sour cherries. They're very different than the Bing variety of cherries that we're used to now, which are very large. Sour cherries are very small, and they turn like this bright red, where Bing cherries are more of a magenta. The sour cherries that grew on the tree in our yard were a bright red. And we would wait for them to be ripe, and we would have to compete with the birds for them because the birds loved them. But at some point, they would be ripe. And my brother and I and our friends in the neighborhood, we would feast on these cherries. My sister didn't like them. My sister was a picky eater as a child. But the rest of us went to town. And at some point we would pick them and bring them to my mom, and then she would make cherry pie. Now, of course, as a kid, I did not understand that that must have been a tremendous amount of work for her, because she needed to pitch all of these very tiny cherries. At least if you're pitting Bing cherries, you're getting a lot of fruit. The sour cherries, very little reward for the pitting effort. So God bless my mom. Now as an adult, I realize how much effort it must have taken her to transform our bowls of cherries that we so proudly picked, quote, for her, to turn them into pie for us. So thank you, Mom. I can't even imagine how much work that must have been for you. But she did it and she never complained, at least not to us. So for me, summer was always started off with cherries because they came into season earlier. And then the beautiful melons would show up. And I grew up in the era before seedless watermelon was a thing. So in childhood, you either needed to know how to spit out seeds or you just ate them anyways. But watermelon was delicious. Like, fruit was really delicious as a child. And I think in some ways it's because the varieties hadn't been bred yet to withstand a lot of shipping. You know, the kinds of fruit that is and produce that are available in our supermarkets so often these days are different varieties that are more long-lived and that handle shipping better. You know, a lot of the varieties of peaches or nectarines, they're not going to hold up if they have to be shipped somewhere. Which brings me to some of my favorite fruit experiences. And I want to wax poetic for you about one of my favorite places to go, which is Berkeley Bowl. When I first moved to the area, one of my neighbors said, "Have you ever been to Berkeley Bowl?" And I said, "No, what is it?" And he said, "Oh, I have to take you." So Berkeley Bowl is a supermarket that specializes in produce. They have lots of other things as well. So they carry packaged goods, right? They have a butcher department. They have a hot bar. They have amazing stuff. But the thing that they're really known for is their produce. So their organic produce section is probably larger and has more variety than your normal supermarket conventional produce. And then they have their conventional produce section, but also much of it is locally grown and just can't be certified as organic. But when a fruit is in season, they have so many varieties of that kind of fruit. So when apples are in season, or even most of the times during the year, because now they ship apples from New Zealand. I mean, we're getting apples from all the way around the world. They have many, many varieties. So this time of year is the best time in the world to go to Berkeley Bowl because it's summer fruit season. So for pluots, they might have 10 different varieties of pluots, many different varieties of apricots and melon. And this is where I want to share with you about another one of my very favorite varieties of fruit. And that is the sugar kiss melon or sugar kiss cantaloupe. I loved cantaloupe as a kid. I've eaten a lot of it as an adult, but also as I got older, cantaloupe became less flavorful. So I wasn't as into it as I used to be as a child. Have you discovered this about any of the fruit in your life? That it seems to be less flavorful than it once was? So at some point at Berkeley Bowl, I saw the sugar kiss, and they always have little handwritten signs that say things like super sweet, so you sort of know what you're getting into. And I bought one. And it tasted like cantaloupe from my childhood. It was super sweet and juicy and delicious. And I was like, what is this magic? Was this just a good cantaloupe? Or is it this variety of cantaloupe? Because now that I shopped at Berkeley Bowl, I knew there were many different varieties. It's not just cantaloupe. If you go to your regular supermarket, they have cantaloupe, and you don't know what variety it is or what it tastes like. So I went back, and I got a few more Sugar Kiss, and each one was just as delicious. So then, every year, I would wait for the Sugar Kiss melons to come to Berkeley Bowl. Their growing season typically is June till about September. The ones that come to market in June, in my opinion, are the best. They are the absolute sweetest. The ones that come a little bit later, I think they've been growing longer and might have a higher water content. They're still good, but they're not as good as the ones that I get in June. In the last few years, Trader Joe's, at least out here, I don't know about other Trader Joe's, started carrying the Sugar Kiss melon. I know they have them right now, as does Sam's Club. At least the Sam's Clubs out here have them. I have one cut up in my fridge right now, the same way my mom used to cut up our cantaloupe. I cut it up. And I have one in the standby position for when I'm finished with the one that's cut up. And I will be securing 2 more this week because they're delicious. So Sugar Kiss melon, yet another one of my favorite fruit varieties. So we have Kyoho grapes is one of my absolute favorites. And we have the Sugar Kiss melon. A third one I want to introduce to you, which is sadly out of season, but especially if you're in the US, mark your calendars for January and February of next year. They are the sweetest batch blackberries from Driscoll. I don't know how they grow them. I believe they're grown in Mexico. They're a different variety that has been developed to be super, super sweet. Now, normally I cannot eat a lot of blackberries because they're acidic. I don't do very well with a lot of berries. I can have a few here and there. So even the blackberries that we're growing out back, I can only eat 1 or 2 of them. But the sweetest batch blackberries from Driscoll are like sugar. And so when they're in season, usually Sam's Club gets them first. And they're ridiculously cheap when it comes to blackberries. Usually a Sam's Club size container of blackberries can cost between $6 and $7. The sweetest batch boxes, which are pretty big, I think run about $4, which I guess is not ridiculously cheap. I just mean they are cheaper than other blackberries. You're not paying a premium for them at Sam's Club, at least. So when they're in season, I buy like 10 boxes. I start off with like 10 boxes, and I don't eat them all right away. I am not that much of a fruit eater these days, but I freeze them. I wash them and I dry them, and then I put bags of them in the freezer, because then all through the year I can use them in my smoothies or make blackberry ice cream in my Ninja Creamy. And so I wind up buying a ton of them when they're in season, but their season is very short. I believe Sam's Club stopped carrying them in April, and then they continued to be available at Berkeley Bowl and Whole Foods, which I was grateful for, but those were $7 or $8 a box. So $7 or $8 a box, I'm a little more selective about binging on blackberries, but when they are available at Sam's Club, I stock up so that I have them in my freezer throughout the year. Although I didn't do a very good job of stocking up this year because I only have like a quarter of a gallon size bag left. And I'm not using them in my smoothies right now because I want to save them to make ice cream at some point. So, 3 awesome fruits: Kyoho grapes, sugar kiss, melon, sweetest batch, blackberry from Driscoll. I have one more favorite to share with you. I am a connoisseur of fruit. So I love going to our farmer's market. We have a very sweet, small farmer's market here in Vallejo. And somewhere around late June or early July, the nectarines are ripe. I thought a nectarine is a nectarine. Again, what did I know? I would just eat them. And for many years, I thought I did not like yellow nectarines because they were too acidic. Again, I can't handle acidic fruit very well. And so I always would buy the white nectarines, which were delicious. And that was my go-to. And so last year, I'm trying to remember how this happened. Wes, every once in a while, likes yellow nectarines. He's not a big fruit eater. So I think I was buying my white nectarines, and I bought some yellow nectarines for him, because I try to get some fruit in him every once in a while. And I don't remember if I tasted it at the farmer's market or when I cut it up for Wes, because I like to cut up fruit. That's just how I prefer to eat it. I tasted it, and it tasted like sugar. It was unbelievable. I was like, I've never tasted a yellow nectarine like this before. It's so good. So the next week I went back, and I said, what was this unbelievable nectarine? And the variety is honey blaze nectarines. And they're a little bit on the crisper side, so they don't get soft right away. And I put so many of them in our fridge. I was like, I'm buying them. And I'm glad I did, because their growing season is very, very short. And within a few weeks, there were other yellow nectarines, but they weren't as good. They have mango nectarines now that sort of have a mango flavor. And so I've learned that there's a few weeks there where the window for yellow nectarines is on. And so this year I went to town. I sampled all the different vendors, and when I found the vendor who had the sweetest yellow nectarine, I bought a bunch of them. And sadly, I will say the growing season for my favorite varieties of yellow nectarines is now over. There are still good yellow nectarines at the farmer's market, but I'm very disappointed when I taste them because they are not as good as the sort of crispy, unbelievably sweet yellow nectarines that are available earlier in the summer. The other fruit that I will wax poetic about is watermelon. I love watermelon. LOVE, love it. Now here's the thing, Wes doesn't eat it, so it's just me. And before my surgery, I could eat a lot of it because it's mostly water, right? And so I would buy a Costco-sized full watermelon and really hope I could figure out how to pick a good one. I am not a good person to select the right watermelon. I've watched all the YouTube videos and the TikToks, and I still don't know how to pick one because the ones that I pick following all of the signs typically are still not great. And I would eat on that for a week, but these days, because I've had bariatric surgery, I can't eat much. So I either have to buy pre-cut watermelon, which I typically don't like to do because it's not very good or fresh, or I buy the little mini watermelons, which to me don't have the same kind of flavor as the bigger ones. And I haven't tried this yet. Here in Vallejo, and this might be in many different places, there is a guy in a truck behind a grocery store who is selling these giant watermelons, both yellow and red. Did you know there are yellow watermelons and the flesh is much sweeter? I have bought them before and they're delicious, but it messes with my head because I keep thinking it's cantaloupe or honeydew and it's watermelon. But the yellow watermelons are amazing, and I have really wanted to go and buy one of his watermelons, but they're enormous. There's no way I could ever eat that much. I would have to be giving watermelon to neighbors, and I guess I could do that. But I still do keep the occasional personal-sized watermelon in the house. I have one on the counter right now. And the thing about watermelon is, like, you never know what you're going to get, right? It's like, it could be good. It could be really bad. Like a mealy watermelon to me is such a bitter disappointment. It's like, no, I'm so sad. So I don't know how good the small watermelon is that is sitting on my counter right now. I will perhaps report back to you another time. Not that I expect you to care, but I will be opening it soon. But right now in my refrigerator, our refrigerator, but I think of the fruit as mine because Wes doesn't eat it, I have a couple of apples that are probably going bad because every once in a while I want a really good apple, and my personal favorite variety of apple is the Envy apple. That's my go-to. Sometimes an opal apple. I have my Kyoho grapes. I also have some green grapes that are sweet. I will always try a green grape at the market before I buy them because I cannot stand tart grapes, which are pretty sweet, and I keep those to chop up into my salad. I make a big salad a few times a week, and I always put grapes in my salad. I have a cut up Sugar Kiss melon right now. I have some blueberries in the back of my refrigerator in a mason jar that, just as I think about it, I have completely forgotten that they're there and they may not be in good shape. So those will get tossed probably after I finish this recording. Oh, I have some yellow nectarines. And always the requisite bananas. We always have bananas in this house. I think there are many signs of a healthy, balanced marriage. And I think one of them is that you each like a different ripeness on bananas. So however the bananas are, there will be someone in the house that will enjoy them. Wes likes them on the green. He doesn't like green bananas, but if they're yellow with a little bit of green, that's his preference. No surprise, I like them when they're riper and sweeter. Like, just figure I like all my fruit super sweet, high sugar content. Otherwise, what's the point? And when they get too ripe, I peel them and cut them up and put them in a bag in the freezer for my smoothies. So there's always bananas in some state of ripeness on our counter. And I think that is pretty much all the fruit that I have in our house right now. I will add that one of the weird realities of having bariatric surgery is that my brain often wants to buy more food than I can eat. So I really have to remind myself I can't eat it. Before the surgery, I might have had pluots and other fruits added into my repertoire, but the reality is I might eat one serving of fruit a day in addition to whatever I put in my smoothie. And so I have to remind myself not to go crazy at Berkeley Bowl or the farmers market because I'm the only one eating it. So I will give you one more fruit story, which is about cherries. So I already shared with you that I grew up eating sour cherries off of our tree. And at some point the tree died and it had to get cut down, and then we had to just get normal cherries, Bing cherries, which is what we grew up with. And I always have loved cherries. Loved them when they were in season. I was so happy. And I would binge on them. When I moved to Los Angeles, I discovered, and I don't know if they do this anymore, but at street corners, there would be vendors, usually some guy, with these plastic bags of cherries that they would be selling, like on the street corner. So as you pulled up to an intersection, there would be some guy selling these bags of cherries. And I seem to remember they were $2 a bag, and they were imperfect cherries. So a perfect cherry, has the fruit and the stem. Sometimes, though, there's a seed popping out on the side, or two cherries have grown together. And I don't know that this is true or if it's an urban legend, but someone once told me that when people are picking the cherries, they can keep the imperfect cherries to sell. I don't know that that's true, but that's what I remember at the time. So these people would be out at the intersections selling bags of imperfect cherries, which tasted just fine. And my cousin and I called them freeway cherries. We would call each other up and we'd be like, hey, the freeway cherries are out. And then we would, in our respective apartments, go and buy our stock of freeway cherries. And respectively, we would binge them. And then each of us would get sick. And then we would call each other, because we didn't have text back then. And we'd be like, oh my God, I got a cherry stomach ache. That's what we called them. And the other person would go, I did too. I have a cherry stomach ache. So there was this whole cherry season ritual my cousin Susie and I shared, which was the freeway cherries would become available. And then at some point, the inevitable cherry stomach ache would happen, because you would try to gauge how many cherries you could eat before you would get sick. Was it 10 cherries? Was it 12? Was it 8? Like, there was a number of cherries you could eat before you would get sick. But if you went beyond that, the inevitable cherry stomach ache would happen. So, in my more recent years, I no longer eat cherries. I might eat 1 or 2 if I'm at Berkeley Bowl, and I will try them. I do not eat them anymore because I suspect my threshold for a cherry stomach ache is very, very low this time of life, where maybe I could only eat 4 before I would get sick. Sadly, even the Kyoho grapes I have right now, I can only eat a couple at a time. If I eat more than that, I will get an upset tummy. So, alas, as I age, I have to shift my fruit patterns, but it's okay, because there's still a lot I can have. My melon, my nectarines, there's plenty of delicious produce to be enjoyed. So I did it. I filled 40 minutes of sharing my ode to fruit. I have shared with you my memories of fruit as a child. I have given you some very helpful shopping hints. Say we, Kyoho grapes. I'm just saying, good idea. It'll be in the show notes. And if you happen to come across a sugar kiss melon, it'll say it on the label at your local Trader Joe's or supermarket. Get it. I don't care how expensive it is. Buy it. And they don't last a long time, so this is not the kind of cantaloupe you can leave on your counter for 3 weeks. You're going to want to cut it within a few days of buying it. and let me know what you think. It would bring me great delight to know that I have brought you some lovely new experiences to have this summer. So thank you so much for letting me share this with you. I love you. I am so deeply grateful for the gift of you. The world is better because you are here. And thank you so much for listening. We'll talk again soon. Thank you.